Everyone, is everyone here? Hello, welcome to 2023 Fiveable Cram's AP Human Geo, the best AP, some say, including me. Today's night 2, so we're going to be covering units 3 and 4, and let's get started, I guess. And what's the changes?
First, let's just go over some community agreements. First, be supportive and lift each other up. Be patient. We still have tonight and then 3 other nights together, and I promise we're going to cover everything and answer all of everyone's questions. And be kind. Everyone here is a real person and has feelings, so just be nice to everyone.
So, the cram finales, there's going to be 4 things that you need to do in order to really get the most out of what you paid to be here. So, we have a note packet for you. We have the review packet, so you should be filling that out as we go. And then the Cram Hub will host all of the materials that we've released to you. The group chat, which I'm sure most of you are in and typing in right now, you guys can share tips, tricks, participate. That's very, very much appreciated by me. Definitely participate. And then the Q&A tab, if we're confusing you, if you have any questions, or if you have tech issues, also the Q&A tab. And then we'll have 5-minute breaks every once in a while. So go to the bathroom, get a snack, whatever, catch up on those notes. And then the replay will be immediately available once we're not live anymore. So if you want to go back and rewatch, then that is perfectly okay. You can go watch the replay.
Here's the cram schedule for AP Human Geography. Tonight we're going to be reviewing nights 3 and 4. Tomorrow, nights 5 and 6. And then the next day, unit 7, and then a couple more skills. And then the night before the test is the grand finale, and we're going to go over everything.
So just to introduce ourselves, hi, my name is Sylvia. I'm one of your hosts for today. I'm one of the hosts for Unit 3. And then we have a couple people in the chat and other 2 hosts. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
My name's Avery. I'm in charge of Unit 4, which we'll do after Unit 3, obviously. Unit 4 was always my favorite part, and so I'm really excited for this.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm going to be doing Unit 3 with Sylvia. Yeah, Unit 3 is also a great unit.
And as always, remember to follow Think Fiveable on social media. We're on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And an announcement that we have for tonight is that you can win $100 by sharing your cram experience. So you can post about your cram finale experience on either TikTok or Instagram and use the hashtag Fiveable Crams and tag Fiveable. Make sure that your account is public and that you're following Think Fiveable so that we're able to see your posts. And really just try to make some like relatable content and make us laugh. We'll have several winners each week, and we'll select winners kind of throughout the cram finale season. This is really encouraged, especially if you need help with like paying your AP exam fee, since those do tend to be around $100.
Here's the agenda for tonight. We're in the welcome right now, and then we're going to do some Unit 3 content, and then some multiple choice practice, and then we're going to go over a actual FRQ from a previous year, and then we'll have a little break, and then we'll basically do the same thing for unit that we did for Unit 3 for Unit 4, and then another break, and then with whatever extra time, we'll do a Q&A.
And then this is just another overview of the AP Human Geo exam. Remember that all units are equally weighted, except for Unit 1, which has the least amount of weight on the exam content. Section 1 is 60 questions in 1 hour, 50% of your score. Section 2 is 3 7-part FRQs for 75 minutes, which is also 50% of your score. So today we're going to be covering Unit 3, which is Cultural Geography. So I will be covering this unit as well as Alicia. So what exactly is culture? So culture is something that kind of sets apart different groups of people. So for example, I'm from Miami and I was born in Cuba. So I belong to a Hispanic culture and I have a lot of beliefs and social norms that come from that culture. So a lot of Cubans tend to be Roman Catholic. Some Cubans might belong to the African spiritual religions of Cuba. But we do have our own social norms and customs that distinguish us from maybe other Hispanic or Latino countries. But that's just my distinct culture. And then we have two different types of culture, being material, which is tangible items. So maybe like artifacts or different like little trinkets, different types of clothing, furniture, etc. Then we have non-material culture, which has to do with customs, stories that are passed down, different traditions, religion, as well as maybe different vocabulary in their languages. So, as a part of culture, there are three distinct types of like groupings in culture. So, I'm just going to give an example. It's kind of personal to me. So, my nationality, so the country that I owe like legal citizenship to, is America. But I could also say that my nationality is Cuban. My ethnicity or my cultural identity and background, I am predominantly Spanish, and my race, I am considered white. Um, and race has to do with physical characteristics, again, that are inherited from parents. Ethnicity has to do with cultural identity. So someone can identify as, like, if they're Latino, they can identify as a different variety of things, depending on their composition. But that's totally up to them. And then nationality, again, is where you owe citizenship to. So I'm a naturalized citizen in the United States of America, so my nationality would be American. So cultural landscapes are kind of determined and shaped by the human imprint and also the human activities. What this means is that like the people that kind of live in an area can shape the way that these cities, these streets are kind of formed. So here in Miami, we have multiple ethnic enclaves, and ethnic enclaves are essentially neighborhoods that um, may belong to predominantly one ethnicity or more. Um, there are a lot of these in New York City, for example, but in my home, Miami, we have Little Havana, which is kind of like a big home of Cuban culture. Here in this picture, we have Calle Ocho, which is the hearth of Little Havana, and we have this chicken that has kind of like these distinct like objects and parts of Cuban culture and Cuban American culture as it is in the United States in Miami. And here we have Istanbul. So Istanbul is it used to be Christian and then it was Islamic, but as it is now, it's kind of characterized by the minarets and the domes of the two mosques. And of course, there has been a lot of changes in religion in Istanbul throughout the years because of its history, but it's kind of shaped by the predominant religion and the characteristics of that religion's architecture, um, as seen by the religious buildings. Then here we have an example of a Chinatown. So there are a lot of Chinatowns all throughout the United States that have kind of same architecture, and again, they're a representation of the people that inhabit them. So usually in these areas, there'll be a lot of stores and a lot of like symbols belonging to that culture. So let's think about other examples that affect um, of culture that affect the landscape. So in culture, as well as non-material material culture, we also have folk and popular culture. So folk culture is usually typically passed down from families or kind of like villages or like smaller like cultural groups. And then popular culture tends to be um, distributed at like the mass. So okay, I'm gonna start going slower. Sorry. Um, so popular culture, when we think about that, like nowadays we have technology, so we have social media, so there are a lot of things that we can kind of spread more easily. So for example, English is a very popular language that's used to connect on the internet. And there's a lot of different things that belong to popular culture that we've come to know, not just like in America, but in other nations as it spreads. Um, but folk culture is something that's like more personal. again, when you think of like folk tales or folklore, it's something that's passed down from generation to generation within a group. And then, of course, this affects food as well. Like, I know that there are maybe some indigenous tribes that have their own foods that may not be popularly known. And then there are some other dishes out in the world that may be super widespread. So when you think of like a hamburger or a pizza, those are two things that are typically consumed worldwide because they have been diffused all throughout and they have become very popular. So there's different types of diffusion. Check. Okay, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not going too fast for you guys. So the different types of diffusion of culture, we have relocation, contagious, and stimulus, and hierarchical. Sorry. So hierarchical, we're going to start with this one since this one has to do with power. So usually the people that are in power kind of influence things that are spread hierarchically. So let's think about Facebook, for example, that's listed here. So Facebook was started by Mark Zuckerberg, who was a student at Harvard and kind of wanted to get to know his classmates, I believe. So, that's something that came from the Ivy Leagues, and the Ivy Leagues, which are 8 universities in America, are typically known to have a lot of power and influence, not just in the academic sense, but also in terms of the people that come from Ivy Leagues. Then we have influencers. So let's think about TikTok. So TikTok has made a lot of regular everyday people influencers that kind of give us a look into new types of fashion, makeup, food, different things like that. And then this is also something that can kind of tag along to contagious diffusion. For example, as I was saying, TikTok memes are pretty widespread. They kind of spread throughout. You see a funny meme, you send it to your friends, and it can go from your social wall on Facebook to your Twitter timeline to your Instagram story, and you're DMing it to your friends. So that's an example of contagious diffusion. Then we have stimulus. So, for example, as I was saying earlier, a hamburger or pizza, those are two very popular foods. And this kind of has to do with language. So, for example, how it's saying McDonald's in Hindu countries. Um, so, since English is a language that is widely spoken throughout India, this is also like a possible explanation for why McDonald's and why hamburgers are widespread there. Then we have relocation. So, when you think of relocation, it's kind of spread throughout. So, let's think of the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, the hearth of it was from Wuhan, China, and then it kind of spread throughout the world and became a global pandemic. Yeah, let's move on. So this is the diffusion S curve. So the diffusion S curve goes along like the adoption of technology. Okay. Do you guys have any questions right now? Okay, I'm gonna go back to hierarchical diffusion. So a lot of people are asking.
This helps. All right. Can you see me okay?
Mhm.
On this diffusion of culture slides, for each different type of diffusion, let's see in the chat like what kinds of other examples we can come up with. Start with like relocation.
Okay, so when we think of relocation, we can think of the Silk Road, for example. So the Silk Road was a trade route throughout Asia, and this was used by many countries to kind of distribute different goods. So that's an example of relocation diffusion. As I mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic, it originated from Wuhan, China, and then it kind of spread throughout the globe, and it affected people. I think a lot of people want me to go over like the difference between hierarchical and contagious, or just go over hierarchical again. So hierarchical comes from power. So as I had mentioned, because Facebook was started by Mark Zuckerberg and he was from Harvard, Harvard, for example, has a really big alumni connections. So it was very easy for him to start up this um, social media because of the connections that Harvard has, and because Ivy Leagues have a huge influence. Same thing with cell phones. Cell phones hold a lot of power because we're able to distribute a lot of information quickly. And yeah, it just comes from power. And then contagious is something that's just kind of catchy. So as I was mentioning with the example, memes can be kind of like shared around quickly, as well as GIFs. And then also TikTok. TikTok is something that is very popular, not just within teenagers, but also people outside of that age group. Because it's very easy to get hooked on like a TikTok and kind of share it around, and you send it to your friends, you post it on your Instagram story, you send it through messages, send it through TikTok messages, and it spreads around pretty quickly. And then with the For You page, of course, things kind of generate with the algorithm and gain a lot of attention and traction. Um, and that is something that a lot of people go through in their everyday lives. They'll go through the For You page. I know I do personally. Let me see.
Another example of hierarchical diffusion would be like if the leader of a country, so like the president, started doing something, and then people saw that, and because you see that person as like powerful and like you think that what they do is good, then like normal people started doing it. So it's just spreading from like power at the top to like normal people lower, if that makes sense.
Alicia, do you want to answer this question on the
Yeah.
stage?
That's a really good question about reverse hierarchical diffusion. So like normally hierarchical diffusion would be going from the top down. So it's the reverse. So it's spreading from like the bottom up basically. So things would start like at the bottom of the hierarchy. So like everyday people, and then it would slowly like spread to people higher up. So like people with more power and influence. So and then like so yeah. So just kind of the opposite of normal hierarchical diffusion.
Okay, so we're gonna go through we're gonna go back to the side that we were on about historical diffusion. So colonialism. So when you think colonialism, and I wouldn't say it's first instance, but one of the biggest instances of colonialism was the Columbian Exchange, which began in 1492 when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Um, yeah. Okay, so Christopher Columbus was an Italian explorer that had been hired by Spain after Spain reunited, and he was essentially tasked with building their empire. So he took some conquistadors with him, and he landed in many. He was in search of India for spices, but he actually ended up going the wrong way and then landed in the Caribbean. And then, as we know it, he colonized the Taino people. And um, when his men came to these islands in the Caribbean, a lot of the Taino people did die because of the diseases that his European men were bringing. Um, but eventually, their conquest of these islands brought about religion. So Spain was Catholic at the time, since um, Christianity had spread from Italy. Um, and then they brought over this religion to the Caribbean islands, as well as the language, which was Spanish. And this had a lot of impacts on the architecture, the art. Of course, they had to assimilate to a new language, but they eventually created their own cultural identities, especially afterwards when they did go back and they brought African slaves into these Caribbean islands. They ended up forming their own cultural identities as they kind of nationalized and became their own countries. So they ended up becoming their own cultures, which we'll learn about later. Oh, okay. So cultural syncretism, as I was saying, is the blending of cultures. So eventually, when the viceroys or the Spanish came into what is now known as modern day Mexico, obviously they brought through their Catholicism and their beliefs. And in Catholicism, the Virgin Mary is the mother of Jesus Christ. And in Mexico, they had adopted her as La Virgen de Guadalupe. And a lot of the influence from Spain at this time when they went into Mexico is seen in the way that the La Virgen de Guadalupe is depicted, because at this time Baroque art was very popular, so she was created with a kind of a darker set of colors, of course having her own different identity, but this is the way that the cultures have been blended from Spain and their art and the of course, their language and the religion that they had pushed onto what is now modern day Mexico, but also the parts of the cultures of the indigenous people in Mexico. And then another example that we have is Taco Bell. So as Mexicans came into the United States, opening restaurants and cooking their dishes and kind of spreading them, at a point it kind of gets mixed with what is thought to be American food, and then that becomes Mexican American food. So we have a lot of popular chains that are Mexican American. For example, we have Chipotle, we have Taco Bell. Can't think of any others right now. But yeah, essentially syncretism is the blending of cultures. So as I mentioned, I am Cuban, and a lot of people that are Cuban are our culture is kind of distinguished by different customs that were brought by African slaves, the Taino people, as well as the Spanish. So I speak Spanish, and I have a lot of customs, and I eat foods that are very similar to a lot of African dishes that I see on TikTok or in recipe books. All right, if you guys have any questions.
Sylvia, do you want to go back to the S-curve slide? I think a lot of people were curious about that one. I think it was like 2 slides ago, maybe? Yeah.
So the S-curve, again, just depicts like the adoption of technology based on the quantity of users over time. I wouldn't say this is like going to be heavily covered on the exam, but it is good to know what it is and what it means. Does anyone have any specific questions on that?
Yeah, basically the S-curve is just like over time, the quantity of users increases. So as technology becomes more and more popular, it will get more users, and which you can sort of see on the curve. And the words written by the line just show like how the people who are using it would be categorized. So like at first it would be like the inventors using the technology, and then over time it would just be most people.
Okay, so someone said, oh, I'm not sure if the question's popping up. But someone said, can you explain the difference between assimilation, acculturation, and syncretism? I believe this is right after. Okay. So we're going to explain that later. We're just going to be answering some other questions, but we will eventually get to that content. Okay, so we're going to go over like the impacts of trade and historical diffusion. So as I was talking about the Columbian exchange, so after Columbus sailed to the Americas and went to the Caribbeans, he eventually brought back resources to Spain, and these resources are being brought back to Spain and then taken to Africa, and then from Africa, slaves were taken over to the Caribbean. So it's very important to know about this, especially when thinking about diffusion, because it has to do with relocation. So when we think of Unit 3 connects into a lot of the rest of the units in Human Geo. And let's think of trade in the context of relocation, as well as like the Columbian exchange, where religion, language, and resources were kind of taken. So Columbus came from Spain and then brought those things over to the Caribbean and to Latin Americas. And by that relocation, those things spread in the Americas and then eventually allowed those different nations to create their own cultures. So through syncretism, they created their own distinct cultures because of the influences of all these different things. And then again, going back to this, so the religion had been forced on these people in that region, and so the religion and language was forced onto these people in that region, and because of that, so for example, the Caribbean and Latin Americas was full of a lot of indigenous tribes, so namely the Taino, and then there are a lot of other indigenous tribes throughout. But because of this forced language and religion, they did lose their own kind of cultural values and customs. So nowadays, the people that are Taino or have Taino descendants, they might not have as many elements of their culture as other people, like for example, the Spanish do. And even in Spain, there is the Basque people that have kind of lost some of their values throughout the years. And then when we think about diffusion in the context of technology, we had the printing press made by Gutenberg, who was a German inventor. So when he made the printing press, this was able to stimulate a lot of communication, specifically in like books, novels, but it had to do with the Bible. So because he had created the printing press, it was a lot easier for the distribution of the Bible to spread throughout Europe, and it was a lot easier for people to access the Bible and learn about Christianity, and that allowed Christianity to spread throughout as the Bible began to be translated in multiple languages. Okay. Any questions? Okay, so someone said, what is triangular trade? So the triangular trade is kind of the formation of like trade within, so from Spain to the Americas, and from the Americas to Spain, Spain to Africa, Africa to the Americas. Kind of went like that in a triangle where they were exchanging different resources. When this live is over, you guys are welcome to go back to the map and see like the specific resources that are shared. But it was mostly like crops. Oh yeah, not just Spain. Yeah, so it was Europe, Africa, and the Americas that shared their resources like in the triangular formation.
Yeah, it was more Europe as a whole, not just Spain. So like Britain and France and all those other European countries.
Alicia, do you want to answer this question?
Sorry, the questions are lagging for me.
Okay.
I'm trying to retrieve there.
Can you tell us a way to differentiate different types of historical diffusions?
So the different types of historical diffusions, just you just kind of have to know for them. So for technology, like if it's an actual like invention or like a new idea that's spreading, then that's probably technological diffusion. And then the other types of diffusion, such as like war and conquest, like that's more of an easier one to identify because it's pretty easy. Like if something's in a war, like it's probably the war and conquest one. So it's not going to be that important on the test to distinguish the different types of historical diffusions, but you just need to know what historical diffusion is and the examples, but you're not really that much going to have to differentiate them.
Someone said, so the printing press allowed for contagious diffusion of Christianity even further. Essentially, yes, because the printing press allowed for many Bibles to be printed. And of course, as Bibles were printed, a lot of people had access to them. And at this time, if they were well versed in like other languages, they were able to translate it. And then as a result, Christianity was more accessible and spread throughout Europe.
Okay, so some ecological factors of historical diffusion. So sometimes the environment will affect the world. So, for example, the Irish potato famine. So basically, there was a food shortage based on potatoes in Ireland. So that caused many Irish people to move to other places of the world. So that was a factor that influenced the diffusion of Irish people. And then today, Irish people still live all over the world. And that is in part because they were trying to go away from the Irish potato famine. There and ecological factors could have many roles. For example, like maybe some land that was once fertile is not fertile anymore. Maybe people will move to new land in order for it to be fertile again, and that's just diffusion mostly on a smaller scale because people probably won't be moving very far, but it is still diffusion. Sylvia, do you want to go to the next slide? Okay, so now we're going to get into the contact between cultures section. These words are very confusing, and I often mix them up, but just try your best to try and distinguish the difference between them, and I'll obviously explain them. So acculturation is the adoption of new culture but it's still maintaining a lot of their old culture. So an example like on the screen would be immigrants maybe adopting new names because that might make it easier for them to integrate into society, but they're still going to speak their traditional language and maintain many aspects of their culture. So just simply put, acculturation is like adopting some parts but not all of them, which is different than assimilation, which is essentially adopting all of the parts of a culture. So sometimes assimilation can be forced, which is where you're like a indigenous community might be forced to assimilate and kind of take on the culture of the larger community, which is obviously horrible. But assimilation is like when everything is adopted, but acculturation is only some things. And multiculturalism is the coexistence of many cultures. We have that here in the US. Many cultures all live together in one country, which is definitely a good thing. Every culture is valued, and all the cultures are valued, and they all bring something different, which is very important. Nativism is conflict between cultures and any like negative attitudes that might be put on someone because of their culture, which is horrible. And then cultural appropriation is when a normally majority culture might make fun of or mock a minority culture. And normally it's for the majority's culture's own benefit. So some sports team names, most of them have been changed, but some still exist where the sports team names is in the US mocking indigenous cultures, which is a prime example of cultural appropriation. But it is getting better. Most sports teams' names have been changed, which is better. If you take away anything from this slide, just remember the difference between acculturation and assimilation. Again, assimilation is like the full adaptation of one's culture, which can be forced, and acculturation is just some aspects of adopting someone's culture. Sylvia, can you go to the next slide?
Yeah, 1 second. I think we had a question about okay. So the questions are currently lagging, so sorry that they're not popping up on the stage for y'all to see. But we have a question. Is this a good explanation of assimilation? When people, usually immigrants who move to a new country, lose touch with their old cultural traits and traditions and adopt new ones from the place they reside.
Sorry.
Oh no, you can go ahead.
Okay. That would be a really good example. On the slide, it says 4th or 5th generation immigrants not speaking the culture anymore. Normally, when people do move to new countries, they will mostly or partially assimilate into the culture, because in some ways that just makes it easier to start your new life in the country as if you're speaking the same language as the people who live there. But definitely that would be a good example.
Yeah, and really quick, guys. Hi, everybody. You guys haven't seen me yet. My name's Steven. I'm part of the Fiveable team. And I just wanted to pop in really quick. I wanted to give like a little bit more context to just these kind of really complicated terms, right? And as Alicia says, you know, like I've been teaching this for a long time and I still get this stuff confused too. But that assimilation question is actually a really good question. And it's the way that I like to think about a lot of these terms is I think a lot about our cities in the United States. If you're in the United States, and I know we have a lot of people from outside of the United States, but I think about the United States and I think about our cities in the United States. And if you've ever been to like New York or Chicago or Boston, you can see a lot of these different sort of like levels of multiculturalism, assimilation. You can even see nativism too, right? And that's kind of a really good place for us to wrap our head around what do these terms actually mean. So I think about like assimilation, for example, and you go to a city and you might see people whose parents or grandparents, they might not even speak English, right? I think about, going to a big city like New York City, and there are a lot of different cultures within that city that might not speak English at all. They may have never learned it, right? They may refuse to learn it. And they have these communities within the city, right? And we would think about this as more of like multiculturalism, right? This is the coexistence of many different cultures, right? You go and you walk down, you walk into, any major Chinese hub in a major city, whether it's San Francisco, New York, Chicago, wherever, and you're going to hear a lot of people not speaking English, right? That's multiculturalism. That's different cultures in action. But then you meet the kids, the grandkids, who are of Chinese heritage, who were born in America, that may not even speak Mandarin, or they might not speak Spanish, right? That's assimilation, right? They have been absorbed into kind of American culture. And we know that American culture is really, really weird too, right? Because American culture is really multiculturalism at its best, right? We have a lot of different cultures, and there's a lot of different things that make America America. But really, when we're thinking about these terms, I like to think about a big city, right? I like to think about all these different cultures and the different ways that these cultures interact with each other, whether it is assimilation, multiculturalism, whatever that might be. I do want to give a little bit of more context in nativism too. If you guys have questions about nativism, I'm happy to answer more specifics. But what I want to say about nativism is this idea that that not only is quote unquote my culture the best, but it's also this idea that other cultures shouldn't exist near me or in the place that I think my culture should exist, right? So for this example, the two examples we have are the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Muslim ban. The Chinese Exclusion Act, I know, is something that a lot of us probably haven't learned about yet because we might be freshmen in high school. And this is something that's definitely more of a US history term. But the Chinese Exclusion Act happened in the late 1800s. And essentially it was a series of laws that outlawed Chinese immigration into the United States, right? So that was us saying, hey, we don't think that the Chinese culture should be in the United States. That's nativism. I see a question, is nativism the same thing as xenophobia? Yeah, to a certain degree. I would say that nativism very much has to do with concrete action that countries have taken to against certain cultures, whereas xenophobia is just scared of a culture that is not yours. But yeah, we can move on. I just wanted to give a little bit more context. So let's go ahead and let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, I just want to say what Stephen was saying is completely accurate. I live in New York City, and you could absolutely see all the different neighborhoods, and there's Chinatown and Little Italy, and even some of the places are ethnic enclaves, and they will have signs for banks and things written in the language that the people there speak, which is really interesting and cool to see.
Totally. Absolutely. All right. Yeah, let's move on to the next slide.
Right.
Okay, so now we're going to start talking about religions a little bit more. If you remember, the hearth is where something originated, so these are basically where these religions originated. So if you look at the map, you can see the symbols, but Christianity and Judaism both originated in Jerusalem. Islam originated in Mecca, Buddhism in northern India, Hinduism originated in the Indus River Valley, and Taoism in China. And these hearths are still very important to many of these religions today. And in some religions, it's very important to travel to the hearth of the birthplace of the religion in order to for various reasons. But for example, many Muslims travel to Mecca as part of their religion. So these hearths still definitely play a cultural significance today in religions.
Yeah, and a little bit more about these religious hearths. The reason that they're important is because oftentimes a lot of religions are impacted by where they were founded. And I think that I think Christianity is a really interesting religion because it's so widespread. But think about the role that location plays when it comes to something like like Islam, right? We think about the Hajj, right? Like the pilgrimage to Mecca, that is one of the pillars of Islam. Location is really important there. And so for something like for religion like Islam, that's super important. For Christianity, it's a little bit different because we have so many different denominations of Christianity. But I think about like Catholicism. Catholicism is a very much a location-based religion. We think about Rome and the influence that the Vatican and the Pope plays on Catholicism. So location is really important when it comes to different types of religion. All right, let's rock. Let's go to the next slide.
Okay, so these are the 5 major religions that you need to know for human geography. There are definitely other religions out there, but for the case of human geography, these are the most important ones you need to know. So first one would be Christianity, which is a universalizing religion, which if you remember, that means that it seeks seeks people to convert to the religion. They do this with the use of missionaries. And it's monotheistic, which means it believes in one God. And I already said it was universalizing. The place of worship would be churches for Christianity, which you can see the little picture of below the cross. So that's a major religion to know. You know, Christianity is very widespread all over the world and very large religion, has many followers. You probably already know a little bit about Christianity. The next religion is Judaism, which, based on the number of people, is a smaller religion, but it still is definitely significant historically. It's what Christianity is based off of. It's an ethnic religion, which means it does not seek to convert people. You still could convert to Judaism if you wanted to, but it's harder, and they're not actively seeking people to convert to the religion. It's also monotheistic, which again just means belief in one God rather than multiple. And the place of worship would be a synagogue, which is in the emoji there. The next religion would be Islam, which the followers are called Muslim, but it's the same thing, if that confuses anyone. It's, again, monotheistic and universalizing. It's also very widespread all over the world, very popular in the Middle East and Southwest Asia. And the place of worship would be mosques, which again, you can see there. The next religion is Buddhism, which is polytheistic, which it doesn't necessarily believe in a god, but it means it believes in like supreme beings, and it's based off of the teachings of Buddha, and it's also universalizing religion. The last religion that's important for human geography would be Hinduism, which is a ethnic religion, which, similar to Judaism, does not seek converts. And I don't remember if it's monotheistic or polytheistic. Stephen, do you remember?
I'm sorry, which religion? I totally
Hinduism.
It's polytheistic.
Yep. Hinduism.
Yeah,
Yep. Polytheistic.
So again, that means belief in more than one God. Yeah, so these are the major religions to know.
Yeah, and really quick, I saw a lot of questions about proselytizing, that big word, that big keyword. Essentially what that means is that you are trying to go out and convert people. This is like one of the big tenements of Christianity. Christians want to make other Christians. This is, I'm going to tap into the nerdy history brain that I have. But, when Christianity was first starting out, it was a banned religion. The Roman Empire banned it. It was illegal. And the way that they survived was by making other Christians. They converted people to Christianity. We think about something like, going back like the Roman religion, right? That polytheistic Roman religion. They didn't need to get other people to join their religion. You were born into it, right? For Christians, though, they had to go out and convert other Christians. And so that's how they survived. And that carries on to today. You think about like missionary work for Christianity. Their goal is to go out and not only help communities, but also make other Christians. And so when you see this word proselytizing, that means to convert somebody. Another thing I want to add to this is that you may see this word Abrahamic religion pop up at some time. And the Abrahamic religions are our first three big religions here, okay? They are Christianity, they are Judaism, and they are Islam. They're called Abrahamic religions because they all come from the teachings of Abraham. They all have the Islamic God, the Christian God, and the Jewish God are all the same God. I kind of like to think about whereas like Judaism is part 1, Christianity is part 2, and Islam is part 3. They all recognize certain prophets and they all recognize certain important religious figures, but they all descend from the teachings of Abraham. So you might see them referred to as Abrahamic religions. And these religions are still really important for today, right? These are historically religious or historically important religions, but they're also really current important religions. We look at these are our major religions of the world today. And connecting back to this idea of place, a lot of these religions, place plays a very important role. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Islam is monotheistic as well as Judaism. Yeah.
Okay, so we just talked a lot about religions. Now we're going to talk a little bit about languages. So a language family is a group of languages that originate from an earlier language. So this picture down here is like a language tree, and basically it shows the little splits in the languages. So the largest language family is the Indo-European language family, which is like the bigger tree that's seen in this picture. That's where English comes from. But you can see all these the blue leaves, I guess. Those are all other languages that come from Indo-European language family. So you can see that that language is split a lot. And this is partially because if two groups are isolated and they originally had the same language, eventually the groups will diverge and create new languages. Bilingualism is when you speak 2 or more languages. So for example, someone who speaks English and Spanish would be bilingual. You have to be pretty fluent in the languages to be considered bilingualism. Like speaking a few words, you wouldn't really be bilingual. Dialects are a variation of speech within a language. So for example, in the US, some regions speak certain languages, certain slightly differently. That could be considered dialects just because like certain words will be different, but overall, like it's pretty much the same language, and someone from one area of the country would be able to understand someone from a different area. Going back to the language family, subfamilies are divisions within a language family, but their origin is more recent, so they wouldn't exactly be considered separate. Yeah, I think there's another language slide which will go into more detail. I think.
Yeah, and we can stay on the slide. I really quick, I'm just going to add a little bit more context to languages, and then we will take a really short break, guys. We'll take like a quick 5-minute break, let you guys kind of recenter a little bit. But talking a little bit more about language groups, probably one of the most common language groups that you're going to hear about are the Romantic languages, right? And these are languages that all descend from Latin. So we think about languages like Spanish, Italian, French. They all descend from the same Latin core, right? And even English to a certain degree. I don't know about what you guys did in middle school. When I was in middle school, I had to learn all these root words and everything. Do you guys still learn that? Do you guys still learn like root words and like all of these like these different like pieces of a word that means, I don't know. This was something I did in middle school, and it was all these like Latin things. You guys still do that? Yes, I'm seeing a lot of yeses. Awesome. I mean, I guess that's cool. I don't know. I wasn't very good at it, but a lot of that was just like learning these like almost like these base Latin words. When you read, if you've ever read Latin, and I don't know if any of us will ever read Latin in our time, but some of us will for sure. A lot of the Latin words we see are going to look really familiar, right? We're going to be like, oh, this almost looks like an English word, or this almost looks like a French word. And that's because a lot of European languages have roots in Latin. Oh, Josh, you take Latin. That's crazy. I did not. I did not take Latin. But a lot of these words had or a lot of European languages have roots in Latin. Even English, which English is a Germanic language. If for those of you that are studying German or speak German or have seen German words, it's very similar. But we still have a lot of our roots in Latin, which is pretty cool. Okay, let's do this. It is 7:55. Let's take a really quick break, guys, just because we need to recenter a little bit. We need to just kind of tighten it back in. And so let's take a really quick 5-minute break. We'll leave this slide up here, and we'll continue on at 8 o'clock. Okay. I'll stay on though. If you guys have questions, I will do my best to answer them. And that's I am in Eastern time. I'm an East Coaster, so it's 7:56 for me. Julia, we're gonna take a break probably about every 45 minutes or so is the goal. I know we ran. It's a little later than 45 minutes right now, but that's okay.
So a lot of people are asking about the different examples of language families. I believe the two biggest are Sino-Tibetan, yeah, and the Indo-European. I would say on the exam, it's not something that's gone into super in depth, but I would look at like one of the maps of like the trees and kind of look for like the biggest branches to see where most of the languages originate from. You might get a question asking you, where does Spanish originate from, or like what language family does that belong to, and that would be Indo-European. So it's not something that you need to know like each exact language, what branch it belongs to. Usually if you do get a question for it, you might even get like the map or like the tree. Are there any other specific questions you guys have for like the tree per se?
I saw one and I lost it. Let me see. Can you explain the differences between language families, branches, and so on? So this is a really good question, and the good way to think about this is is to think about kind of like almost like a pyramid, right? So like we have, or a pyramid's a bad example. I'm like my examples are like not coming to me right now. That ever happened to you guys? So think about like a tree, right? So with the tree, we have our trunk, and then we have our branches going off of our trunk. Our trunk would be something like the European language group, right? This is a major language group, something that originates a lot of different types of languages, right? Oh, Amanda is here.
What's up, y'all? I am now at Becky's house.
Are you guys getting these crazy storms right now? I am like, it is like crazy weather right now.
And I think that's why we're
having some tech issues.
Having some Wi-Fi issues. Yeah. I think we should just take a break right now.
Yep.
And let's do like a 5-minute break, and then we'll pop back in. Person on slides, can you put the timer up?
Yeah, we're currently on a 5-minute break. I think it ends in like 1 minute.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. My bad.
It was like impromptu. But yeah, for the languages, I would really just recommend knowing like the biggest families, which the two biggest are Indo-European and Sino-Tibetan. There are some bigger languages, but it's not that you need to know where each like language comes from specifically. Like that's not something that's going to be tested on, but it is good to know like the origin of most and the biggest ones. But for sure, it's not something that's going to be like super specific. Someone asked, are we going to have practice tests with this information? Yes, we'll have like a short multiple choice quiz for you guys at the end of our content review for Unit 3. Someone said, for the major religion slide, what are the names of the religions from left to right? So this one is Catholicism. A lot of you are saying that like the heart of Christianity is not Italy. That is true. The heart of Christianity is Jerusalem. However, as it evolved into Catholicism, and of course Catholicism is its separate thing, the heart is in Italy, in the Vatican. The second one is Judaism. The third one is Islam. The fourth one is Taoism. And the fifth one is Buddhism.
Okay. Since we've been answering questions throughout the break, I think there's a little bit of stress because it doesn't feel like a break, you know, just what I can see. How are we feeling in the chat? Let me just get now that I'm in a new location, hopefully I'm not too loud. Maybe give me like a little, like, you know, I don't know, wellness check. How are we feeling? You need a break. Okay, let's do this. Let's just put a big, you know, timeout on this. Let's take a little bit of a break. And we won't answer questions and stuff while we do it. Maybe I can put some music on or something. Some lo-fi girl. And then Sylvia and Alicia, you guys can both take a full break too. Here. Okay, let's do 5 minutes. We're gonna come back at 08 time. All right. Let's start making our way back. I'm just going to ease us into it. And I like the lo-fi. It's nice and, chill. So just to kind of give you some, like, before we really dive into it, just like a little bit of like an ease into it. So we did change up some of the slides. So we just kind of made some adjustments on what we were going over and what order and how in depth. And so unfortunately we did those earlier today and then didn't change the review packet to match that. So I know that's kind of stressful, but it's not all that big of a deal. You can instead just sort of use the review packet as a review packet rather than something to follow along with. You could kind of use it to fill it out later. And then instead, while you're watching, something that could be really useful is just sort of taking like just general notes. Like give yourself literally like 2 columns and just start keeping track of like things I feel like I know that I don't need to go back and study, things I feel like I don't know that I do want to go back and study. So that's kind of helpful. All right, so jumping back in, it sounds like we have a little bit left of language to cover, right?
Yeah, we just have this slide and then multiple choice questions.
All right, cool. I'm going to move us to stage left, and then we can go ahead and start talking through this, and then I'll just kind of give us some, I'll kind of help throughout, just like giving us some more examples and whatnot.
Okay, so diffusion of language is similar to what Sylvia was talking about earlier, but basically as people move around the world, they bring with them their languages, and that's an example of relocation diffusion. And then also some other examples is when an area, this doesn't happen anymore, but in a while ago when the areas were being colonized, sometimes they would have, the colonizers would have the people, the indigenous people in the areas start speaking their language, or sometimes they would do that by choice. So an example would be in India. Many people in India started speaking English because India was under British rule, so that happened over time. And also some languages don't really spread as far. It just kind of depends on the language. Like English obviously is the lingua franca, which we'll talk about in a second, but English has spread all over the world, but some other languages don't really spread as much. About lingua franca, is...
What are some other examples of languages that have diffused?
Wait, sorry, you cut out.
What are some other examples of some languages that have diffused?
So Spanish has definitely diffused from Spain, similar to Britain with the ideas of colonization. So it spread to a lot of Latin America, and then also Portuguese spread to Portugal, which spread through the same way. If you ever wondered why Brazil speaks Portuguese while many other countries around there speak Spanish, it's because the Portuguese had control over Brazil. So in Brazil, they started speaking Portuguese, and then Spain had control of the surrounding areas, which is why they started speaking Spanish.
Yeah, perfect. It seems like the chat totally gets it too. Exactly. French in Canada is another one.
Yep. So lingua franca, English is currently the world's lingua franca. It's used all over the world for like many different things. It's it probably is the most popular language in the world. It's used by corporations. So a multinational corporation most likely would use English as their language just because it's common and many people speak it. And so people can communicate better if they speak the same language, obviously. And then many media things are produced in English. Obviously, things in English-speaking countries are mostly produced in English, but even things that are produced in countries that speak other languages sometimes are produced in English. That's just because they think that it'll appeal to more people if it's produced in English. But the lingua franca is just like a worldwide language that's used very frequently. It's used in like trade agreements and things like that. And then pidgin languages they're not based on pigeons or anything, but it's a mixture of 2 languages. So an example would be like Haitian Creole, which kind of goes into the next section, but it's just a mixture of 2 languages. it's not native to either, but it has like simple, smaller like vocab. It's just Pidgin languages. It's kind of hard to describe. They're just a combination of two languages, I guess. And then Creole languages, like I said before about Haitian Creole, which is in Haiti, but it's just a complex mix of two languages. So it's more complex than Pidgin languages, and it's just more used by people. Pidgin languages are simpler, like it says on the slide. Amanda, do you have anything to add?
I think that's about it. The example of Creole is Creole, so that makes it nice and easy. It's just the difference between like Pidgin languages and Creole languages. Pidgin is just very simple. It's like the mixture is almost like it's not like it doesn't kind of become sort of like this whole like complex language. I keep using the same words, but it's like just think of like Pidgin languages as very simple, and then the Creole languages are much more complicated, have all the different like aspects of language.
Maybe if it's easier to think about, like pigeons are pretty simple birds, so if that's, I don't know, that might make it easier to think about simple language.
Yeah, what are they? The rats of the sky?
Yeah, they're everywhere.
I mean, not that that's a note on Pidgin languages, but do all Creolized languages contain a variety of English? No, not necessarily. So you do get combinations of, essentially, like think about how, we've talked a lot about cultural diffusion tonight and how culture moves across the world. So when you think about any of the combinations of different languages that have existed because of all the examples that we've given, whether it's war, technology, or colonization, like languages combine in very unique ways. And all languages have done this. Like as long as you have two people who speak different languages, they either have to agree to speak English or some other type of lingua franca, or you have to, over time, kind of like combine it, So yeah, right. English is not the only one. There are plenty of other ones too, especially like in places like in India or in where you have like tons of languages spoken. You may get something like Hindi, whereas like a more common language spoken, and people may speak different languages at home though. Same in like Spain. People speak different dialects and whatnot. All right, so move to the next one. Like we've kind of been telling you with the culture one, like you can get tripped up on a lot of these like small details, but really just keep yourself focused on some of these bigger themes, and it's going to help you figure it out when you're trying to answer the multiple choice or the FRQ if it's on words that you don't know.
And just to say one more time, we changed the slides very recently, so they don't exactly match the review packet, but if you still want to use the review packet, it's a great way to just go over your knowledge and just fill it out yourself. And you can use these slides to help you, but sorry about that.
Just before we start the cram quiz, some people are kind of confused about like how the different languages break down in the families.
So essentially, like language is it's like fascinating how language evolves over time, and even like how it's evolving in our lifetime, like how words change over time, get connected, get separated, become, like think about when you read Shakespeare now, it's like in English, but it's like not, it's like not how we speak it. And so the big tree of languages, it's like you just keep having these like shifts, these times when the languages are breaking off from each other. And so if you go back far enough, it all sort of roots from a very similar, ways in which we were communicating as humans. And then as people are, regional and localized, it gets like more connected, more specific to that region. But you can find these examples, like in the English language, you have all these types of, we are inspired by many different languages. I don't know if that's going to be helpful enough. Honestly, like, don't try to memorize that language branch. Just like know that the languages like change over time. That's like the most simple way to go about that.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and start on the cram quiz. All right.
Oh. If you guys put the link in the backstage chat, I'll pop it into the button.
Oh, sorry. I forgot to turn up the music for you guys. It's not working.
It seems to work on the next page.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think it's working.
Would it be dangerous if I refreshed?
I don't know. I guess worst case, it just people have to join again, but I don't think they will have to join again.
Nope, it's good. Still not sharing.
I think that the oh man, it is. This song is it's just a royalty-free song, but it's Brazilian samba from Bahia, which is actually where my family's from Brazil, not from Bahia, but my dad lives in Bahia. It's a little Fiveable like lore, I guess. All right, let's go. Let's start quiz. Can you read the question out?
Sylvia, can you read it? It's like really small on my screen.
From the point of view of an American citizen, I categorize the world. The process is the point.
Is she cutting out for you, Alicia?
Yes, she's cutting out. I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can read it. Sorry. From the point of view of an American citizen, I categorize the world into familiar and unfamiliar culture, and often other unfamiliar ones. What processes is this point of view experiencing? Oh, and the answer choices are ethnocentrism, assimilation, globalization, and acculturation. So we'll give everyone a minute to answer.
All right.
Ooh.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So the answer is ethnocentrism. Since this is the point of view of an American citizen, and they're they're categorizing the world by familiar and unfamiliar. And usually when you are ethnocentric, you kind of think of your culture first. So they're categorizing like other unfamiliar cultures because they kind of see themselves as like the top one. Yeah.
Exactly. So like think about ethnocentrism is like your ethnicity is in the center. So you feel like you're right in the center of the world. All right, go ahead to the next one.
Okay. What is the difference between universalizing and ethnic religions? A. Universalizing religions are passed down by generation and don't seek to convert. Ethnic religions seek to convert people. B. Universal religions are that are being practiced currently, and ethnic religions are extinct religions no longer practiced. C. Universal religions seek to convert people. Ethnic religions are passed down by generations and don't seek to convert. Or D. Universal religions are practiced around the globe and ethnic religions are practiced only by one country. So we'll give another couple seconds to answer.
Hit it.
Good job.
Y'all are so smart.
We sort of went over this when we were doing the religions, but just to review, universalizing religions do see converts, and ethnic religions don't really, and it's a little bit harder to join an ethnic religion. Most of the people who practice ethnic religions were born into it.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, wait, you guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Just remember that proselytizing is the same as like universalizing, so they're seeking to convert people into that religion.
Okay. What is a cultural landscape? A, the area of nature preserved by a culture in a certain area of land space. B, the area that a culture did not impact in a certain amount of land space. C, a structure within the physical landscape as a result of human activities and or human imprinting. D, the damage done to a landscape by a culture in a certain area of land space.
Go ahead and reveal. Maybe we'll just do 5 of these questions, then we can go back to the FRQ.
Yeah.
All right. Good job, everyone.
Everybody's making this look easy. It's not easy. This is not common knowledge.
Okay, this is a quick question. Which of the following is a symbolic landscape which holds religious significance? A, the Grand Canyon, B, Temple Mount in Jerusalem, C, New York skyline, or D, Uluru? I don't think we have to go over that one. Seems like people know.
All right, let me go back to the FRQ. Because there is one for culture, I think. And so we do need to switch to Unit 4 soon, but maybe we can spend a few minutes on that.
Mm-hmm.
All these questions, by the way, for the chat, we are, the questions we use for the quiz are a little easier than what you'd see on the AP test, but they're not easy, you know, like people don't just know these things. If you're getting them right, you know what you're doing.
All right, so now we're going to go over this FRQ that relates to Unit 3. So Alicia and I are going to go over each part and kind of discuss. If you guys do want to tag along what you think the answer is and kind of start testing your skills and the knowledge that you have and what we've reviewed, feel free to comment in the chat or in the Q&A. Okay, so this is the FRQ. So the FRQ has a table with information on English speakers in different countries, which was taken in 2018. The table has information from people in the population above age 5. So it details different countries and the amount of English speakers, and then the percentage of the population that speaks English.
So remind us again, Sylvia or Alicia, when you see a verb that says describe, what does that mean?
Okay, so when you see a word describe, that's one of the shorter responses. It should be a few sentences, but not a paragraph or anything. And just briefly explain, like identify, you just have to say. So you have to do a little bit more than identify, but it's not explain. It's like the in between. So you would, for this question, you would probably say, India probably has a large number of English speakers because when Britain colonized the area, they spoke English, and that led to many people in India starting to speak English. But it's probably 1 to 2, maybe 3 sentence answer, but don't write too much because you are timed and you don't want your hand to start hurting from writing that much.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat doing this perfectly. So it's just, 2 sentences will get you. Oftentimes, too, that first one, A, the answer is like in the stimulus. You know, like you really can kind of answer. It's not super hard. It kind of goes almost like in order. This is a good job.
So for part A, the reason, okay, so one historical reason that India has a large influx of English speakers. So out of the table, they have 125, and that is the most out of, oh no, sorry, that is not the most. The most is the United States with 296 million. But the reason that they have the second largest amount of English speakers is due to British colonialism. So in acceptable forms, this answer could be India has many English speakers because of its colonial history as a part of the British Empire. Okay, we're gonna move on to the second part.
Perfect. While you do that, there was one question of like, do you get points taken off if you only write one sentence? No, you get points. This is like a binary grading system. So it's just like either you get the point or you don't. And so if you only write one sentence, you're at risk for not fully answering it. You know what I mean? So if you write two sentences, then you're much more likely to actually get the point because it's more likely that you've included all the information.
Yeah, so they do have a scoring guideline rubric to which they use to grade like each FRQ. So as long as you have the information, that's good. So if you have one sentence, again, you are at risk of not getting that point because you might have missed a piece of the information. So try to write as much as you know in order to hit the point because it's either you get it or you don't.
Perfect. So what does explain mean as the verb?
So explain is usually like a 2 to 3 sentence kind of contextualizing. So in this case, it would be one contemporary reason why people in China and India are learning English. So for this answer, for example, commerce is kind of spread because of globalization. So English has become a lingua franca and has been used a lot in commerce and in global trade and the markets. So in order to stay competitive, people in India and China might have to learn English to be able to communicate and trade.
Yeah, all these like examples in the chat where you literally using the word lingua franca is good. They're probably going to look for that. And so in terms of explain, it's like you want to say that, but then you need to actually give the definition of that in a sense, like really like put the details in there.
Maybe should go to the
Some other acceptable answers include mentioning educational opportunities in English-speaking countries. So, for example, the United States, the United Kingdom, and then there's also like answers that might have to do with popular culture, such as online content, social media. For example, now we have TikTok and such. So yeah, just mostly the growth of English. So it's either business, educational opportunity, trade, and tourism can also hit that point.
Perfect.
Okay.
And to answer the question in the chat too, if you over answer it and write more, you're not going to get points off. So remember, it's literally just binary. So it's like if you have the answer in there, you're getting the point. They're not going to take a point off if you wrote too much. But you're just at risk now for not finishing. So don't spend more time than you have to, because you put the answer in the first 2 sentences and then you wrote a whole paragraph, you just wasted your time. You didn't even need it.
I saw a lot of answers in the chat relating to India and China being semi-periphery. That isn't something that is necessarily looked for on the scoring guidelines, but if you do have that knowledge, it does help to kind of contextualize in the answer.
So then part C of this FRQ is describe one barrier to the diffusions of English throughout China. This is another describe question, so it should be on the shorter side, but make sure to answer the question. I'll give a second for everyone to put their answers in the chat.
I'm still over here dancing from the quiz music. All right. So for you two, when you get a question like this, if you're like, ugh, I can't remember anything about Chinese history or something, like how would you go about trying to like come up with an answer to this question? Do you have any like, I don't know, tricks that kind of help you?
For me, when I don't know the answer, I look back at the stimulus to see if that will give me any clues to what the answer might be or have to do with. So obviously, you would assume something related to language based on the stimulus, but also based on the question, it says English. And also, if I really have no idea, then I'll think about like what the other questions have been about, because normally the questions they ask you in one FRQ are sort of related. So maybe that'll give some hints. But if you like genuinely have no idea, just try and put something down that might be there. Because if you're not going to find the answer, like don't waste your time just like staring at it trying to figure it out. Just move on to the next thing, because you do only have a limited amount of time. So
Yeah, another thing is like just like try to come out of the information for a second and think about like, well, how does language spread? Like some people put in here, like you need internet, you need education, you know, like you can start to think about like some really simple things, and then you can think like, does that apply here? The other thing to remember too is like this is geography class. Another one you could be thinking about is just geography. Think of physical geography. Like what does the landscape look like such that like can people move across it easily? All right, want to talk through the answer?
okay, so the answer for this question, there are many different answers. One of the more simpler answers would be that English, the characters are very different than the Chinese characters. So that would just make it harder. Like, for example, learning Spanish from English is a little bit simpler because the characters are the same. But for someone speaking Chinese to learn English, it's a whole new set of characters, which can be very hard. And then a lot of the answer choices also revolve around access to education. So people not having appropriate access to education. If your school doesn't teach English, then it would be a lot harder to learn English. But if your school did learn English, it would be a lot easier. If your school did teach English, it would be a lot easier. Also, like not enough people in China speaking English. If you're not around anyone who speaks the language, it's a lot harder to learn rather than if you're with a ton of people who speak the language. So there are a lot of different answers that would be correct.
Perfect. All right, we get 3. Oh, I guess this was the really long one, right? All right, we'll keep going.
Okay, so the next part is using the table. Explain one reason for the difference in the percentage of English speakers in the Netherlands compared with the percentage in China. So feel free to shoot your answers out in the chat. I'll give you guys like 1 minute. Yeah. Don't worry about it being like a complete sentence. Just kind of shoot out what you think the answer is. But remember that on test day, you should be writing in the complete answer and in accordance with the task verb.
Yeah, just to kind of keep us moving to like the answer to this one is kind of the opposite as the answer to the last one. Right. So like what does the Netherlands have that China doesn't? And vice versa.
All right, so it's 8:37. So I hope you guys generated some answers up in the chat. That you're feeling good about this FRQ so far. So there are several acceptable answers. So one acceptable answer could be that in the Netherlands, the Dutch schools, require English language competency, but in China, it doesn't exist at the national level. So in China's government, maybe like the states kind of have more control of whether English language is like a requirement, but in the Netherlands, it is required. Another answer can be that the education levels in the Netherlands are way higher, and being bilingual is a very top priority. In the Netherlands, there is more exposure to English as they belong to the European Union.
Cool. So just question for the chat. This FRQ has like a couple more. This FRQ is kind of long, and so in the essence of time, I know we sort of like it's already like what on the 38-minute. We could keep moving to Unit 4, or keep working on this. Yeah, Unit 4 in the chat if you're ready for Unit 4. All right, let's do it. You feel good about Unit 3? So this FRQ is in the slides if you want to complete it. But we'll move on to we'll skip this break for now and then move it into a later point. Since we just took a late break on this one. Thank you, Sylvia and Alicia on Unit 3, super helpful. Look at this chat. Everyone's stoked. Avery, what's up?
Hi, Amanda. I'm the Unit 4 spokesperson, I guess. So I know all the things about Unit 4 that you need to know, and I guess we'll be going over them. So that's good. Unit 4, in my opinion, is the best unit just because, like, I feel like it's the most. I like it the most. It's the most dramatic. I like it. So let's get on with it. Next slide.
Really quick for those of you who are spamming the chat with 4, let's slow it down. There's a few people in particular that are really going at it, and I'm about to hit ban. So if you would like to stay and not get kicked out, Tyler Krishiv.
Yeah, cool it with the 4s.
Great.
I get you're excited about Unit 4, but come on, it's political geography. It's not that exciting. Let's.
All right, he's done. He
go.
can stay. All right, fine. All right, let's do it. I'll stay up and just kind of help you through Unit 4 too.
Okay, thank you. Who's got control of the slideshow? Is that Sylvia or? Thank you. So, intro to political geography. So basically, political geography is all about the political organization of the world, which I get is like a vague term. But basically, it's just how politics will affect the appearance of a map. So political geography affects each country's territory and thereby its appearance on a map. So as you can see, this map states, yeah, that's pretty much it. Next slide. So the first thing that we really have to get settled on is what a state is and like the actual term. And so a state is a defined area ruled by one government, and that's a formal term. So I get like a lot of us live in the United States and we call states like Texas, California, New York, but state in this regard is what we would formally think of as like a country. So this would be an example would be France, Singapore, Iran, pretty much any country. So next slide now. And then a nation is actually the group of people living anywhere. So it would be a group of people with common cultural characteristics. Examples of this would be the Yoruba people in Nigeria, among Chinese people and Finns in Finland. So that's actually a picture of Yoruba people in Nigeria. So we can move on from here. So the next topic is about types of states and nations. So a nation state is just these two words combined, but it's basically one nation is going to make up a vast majority of a state's population. And so a good example of this would be Japan, where most people are Japanese, and Egypt, where most people are going to be Egyptian. And then after that, we have multinational states or multi-nation states. And so this would be take, for example, Indonesia, which is what we have the picture here. There are just so many nations in Indonesia. And so this is what we would call a multinational state. And so these are all a bunch of different groups of people living under one government. So that would be Indonesia, Nigeria, Belgium, even the United States, just because we have so much cultural diversity. And then a multi-state nation would be a nation that has an ethnic majority in multiple states. And a really good example of this would be Korea with North and South Korea. These are all Korean people, but So these are all Korean people. However, we have North and South Korea as separate states, and so they are the vast majority in 2 different states. And then an example of a stateless nation would be Kurdistan. So that would be the Kurds actually live in Turkey, Azerbaijan, Iraq, things like that. There's also be Palestinians who are kind of negotiated just the Gaza Strip and the West Bank in Israel. And then also the Ainu people in Japan. So we said Japan is a nation state, but there is this small ethnic minority in Japan who are a stateless nation, as they're such a small nation. They don't really have a state to themselves.
Totally. Let's keep the slide up for a minute because I know that this is
a lot of information we're spewing at you.
It's definitely a lot of information, and it's like all the words sound the same. So how do you remember the difference between these?
For me personally, you really only need to know nation and state, and then you can just use your knowledge of root words to figure out the rest of these through here. So like
Totally.
multinational state, you get the idea. It's multiple nations in a state.
So Avery, we do have a question for you. So someone said, could the United Kingdom be considered a multi-state because they have Wales, Scotland, and North Ireland and such?
Okay, Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland aren't separate states, and so no, I wouldn't consider that a multi-state nation at all because they're all part of the UK. So it's not like there's separate, like very separate governments, sovereign governments over each of these areas. So no.
But how would you classify the UK?
The UK is a multinational state. So there's so much diversity in the UK. There's so many, I know that there's a lot of Southern Asian people just because of British colonization and stuff like that. So there's so many Southern Asian people. There are African people living in the UK, and there isn't that massive British majority. So that would be a multinational state, if anything.
Totally. Yeah, I know these ones can be kind of hard, but it really is just like, really just think about like the fact that a state is explaining a formal thing. These are like real boundaries, real like
governances.
Yeah, exactly. Like what is it called? I can't think of the word trying to think of, but the nation side of it is much more about like the ethnic group of it. All right. We're going to keep it moving. I know there's lots of words, and we'll keep it going slow too, but we'll keep the slide up for a little bit when we get on these big ones. Go ahead.
Unit 4 is a pretty hefty unit, so there's going to be a lot of words here.
So someone asked, what's an example of a nation?
One example of a nation, if we want to go back to the last slide where we had the examples? I could list more, but Italian people, those would be a nation of people. They're all one ethnic group. There's also the Hausa people in northern Nigeria. There are Igbo in, I think, western Nigeria or eastern Nigeria. I'm not sure. But so that would be like a really good explanation on what a multinational state would be there are Yoruba, Hausa, and Igbo all within Nigeria. So that is what really solidifies Nigeria as a multinational state. It's a very diverse country, or state, I should say.
Perfect.
So that is an example of a nation.
All right. Well, we're gonna keep moving, but if you still are confused about these, ask a question in the Q&A tab, and our folks in the chat will really help.
Unifying instant. Sorry. So we have the centripetal forces, which are things that are going to pull a country together. So a centripetal force are forces that are really going to bring together all the people of a country and make them like each other more, mostly. And so one of these things would be unifying institutions. So education and holidays, like teaching the American Revolution in schools. You're going to teach your entire populace about these things. They're all going to have the same days off during their school year, things like that. And these are going to help bring together people. So if you want to go to the next thing. Nationalism is very strong patriotism. So you can see nationalism. Do you guys remember during the World Cup and all of the Argentina, Messi, things like that? That is an example of I guess, Argentinian nationalism. There's a lot of pride in being Argentinian, especially during the World Cup. I would know, my grandpa's from Argentina. But there's also political equality. So this would be representation through laws, so fair and legal justice systems. An example of this would be, think of whenever the civil rights movement had ended. You have now much more political equality, and this is going to bring together all these people. Customs and rituals are also, ooh, captions, that's so cool. Oh my gosh, I can see my words. Okay, customs and rituals are songs and traditions that promote a common identity. I remember whenever I was doing my AP seminar packet, we had like this stuff about Estonian nationals who had this song that would bring them together. And so another example would be like the Star Spangled Banner, things like that. Pledges of allegiance. So these are all going to act as centripetal forces in a state.
All of these forces are things that the government itself like wants to have, right? Like there's a real investment from the country itself to like really bring people together, because then they're more likely to, you know, join the military and fight for it. They're more likely to promote it, to protect it, to stay, to build it, you know? And so all of these things really help to just like really focus on the community, you know what I mean? So like a centripetal force, for example, within this cram would be when we're on topic in the chat and we're helping each other. And
let's be on topic in
when
the
we,
chat.
even when we like give like emoji reactions, like that's really helpful, because it's like it's a way for us to like kind of stay, we're kind of unifying, you know?
So I see the question, is nationalism positive or negative? Typically, I would say it's negative, just because nationalism can so easily turn into ethnocentrism, and that's not a good thing. It's not a good look for everyone. However, there can be positive aspects of nationalism, although typically it has a very negative connotation.
Totally.
Yeah. And then if we want to move on to the next topic, it is the complete opposite of this, and it is centrifugal forces. If you along. A centripetal force in political geography? Let me think about that one.
Well, that's this.
Oh, yes, this entire slide. Yeah, so these would all be considered centripetal forces.
Yeah, let's go to the next slide and talk about centrifugal forces.
This one's where the drama kicks in. So regionalism is underrepresented minority population. So this would be the Quebecois people in Quebec, Canada. This could also be Indigenous Canadians, like the Inuits and stuff in northern parts of Canada. These people are underrepresented. This could also, later on, you'll notice it's a devolutionary force, which we'll talk about a lot later, don't worry. Economic divisions, wide gaps between rich and poor. And this is very hard to make state unity, because, I mean, if you'll even think back to like the French Revolution, that was what that entire thing was about. Is you're really rich, we're really poor, we don't like that, I kind of want to topple you. And so that is going to be a big centrifugal force pushing apart nations and states. Ethno-national groups would be state conflicts, leaving room for minority groups to gain power. So that would be Kurds in Syria and Iraq. For example, Iraq, like I know that the northern part of Iraq is considered Kurdish, it's Kurdistan. And so this would be a centrifugal force. It's forcing apart this state of people. And then I saw a question earlier, and it was Brexit as a centrifugal force. You could consider that a centrifugal force just because it's a controversial issue, I guess.
It's like if all the reason for Brexit comes from these types of forces, right? It comes from honestly a combination of a lot of these things, where you just have people wanting to, I mean, in this case, it was less about independence from a state and more about independence from a supranationalist organization, which we'll talk about. But in any case, it's like these are the things that pull people apart, right? Like, I mean, you can really just think about like all of what's going on in a lot of countries today, right? Everything's can feel fragile because there's a lot of energy and like forces pulling people apart. We will take a break in 8 minutes, so just to let y'all know.
Hold on tight. Yeah. Did we already talk about cultural differences? I don't think so.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, there's cultural differences that can also act as a centrifugal force. So that would be lack of unity with languages, religions, ethnicity, and traditions. And if you'll notice, nation states, like states that are made up of one nation, typically are, I guess, more unified than other states. Like Japan has a very sturdy government typically, as compared to like Nigeria or Indonesia, which have to cater to many different people who all have very different opinions. And so an example of this would be India and Pakistan. They used to be the one, I think it was Raj India was what it was called, but they were very different religiously, culturally, so they just had to make the split because they weren't getting along pretty much. And then I see this question. Oh, you can go.
Yeah, no, I was going to answer this question. So like the thing is like a lot of these forces are all happening at the same time. So it can, sometimes be hard to see how that works, but it's like it just depends on which forces are stronger at any given time. Like which are the strongest ones, like is there enough holding this thing together? Are there enough people that want it to remain? So when you talk about American society, like you could come up with examples of all of these centripetal and centrifugal forces. And it's like, how connected are the people in the country to the country itself existing? Is there too many forces pulling it apart, or are there enough forces that will keep it together?
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Do centrifugal forces only apply to a certain state, or could it also be applied to an international level? Also, what's the difference between interregional and intra-regional? Centrifugal forces, typically we are going to talk about within a state, but I mean, a centrifugal force is really anything that forces people together. So I guess, yeah, you could have it between states, but during AP Human Geography, we're going to talk about it inside one state. And then interregional is going to be between regions. Intra-regional is one region, if I'm getting that correct. It might not be. It's been a while.
Yep, intra is within, inter is between.
Yugoslavia, I see that question. We're going to talk about that a lot in the balkanization and devolution section.
Yeah, I mean, think of it this way, y'all. Like any country that's ever like broken apart has, it's kind of caved in, because of these forces. Like think about anything, any movement you've ever seen, and like think about in your classroom or even right now when everyone's like, take a break, take a break, take a break, and we're like, okay, like we'll take a break, and like the force is strong enough to push us to do it, versus like if it's just one person, or if the force is strong enough to keep us here. Like everything ebbs and flows with these forces, and it's just a matter of which is strong enough to kind of tip the balances at that moment.
Yeah, you can think of it as a scale, and if this is the centrifugal forces and it becomes heavier, that's when you're going to start experiencing devolution and your state is going to fall apart.
Totes. All right, let's do one more slide, and then it's break time.
Okay, I need a break.
Oh wait, this one is long. You know what?
This one is long. Let's do the break now. 5 minutes, is it?
Yeah, let's do 5-minute break.
Okay.
Do you have the timer slide?
The timer slide is.
I have the timer slide. Like I can go back to it, but could we just answer this question? It says, are centrifugal and centripetal forces the same as push and pull factors?
No, a push and pull factor applies to migration. A centrifugal force could cause a push factor, I guess, but they're not one and the same at all.
That's exactly right. I see why you're relating those two, because it's, centripetal. We did put the centripetal pulls people up, like together, like the different pieces. And so there is I get why you're saying that, but yeah, it's more of like these forces are causes for migration.
Okay, I think it's about time we go to break because my dog is also whining. So, and I gotta use the restroom. So, see you guys in 5 minutes.
Go ahead. Don't worry about moving all the way. Okay, there you go.
There we go.
Go ahead.
Oh, I forgot to change it from the 8-minute timer, but we'll see you guys in 5 minutes or so.
Thank you.
Right, and we're back.
Hi,
Woo!
everyone. The
All right,
5 minutes, I've been recuperated. I
You feel better?
rejuvenated. I feel better.
And I was over here stretching, just like
Yeah,
hanging
my
out.
dog, it's thunderstorming, I guess all across the United States right now. But
Yeah.
my dog is like 16 years old and
Oh.
he's terrified of thunderstorms. So I had to mooch it out a little bit.
So we are going to this. I'm going to be honest with y'all in the chat. This slide has it's a meaty slide. It's a lot.
It's
There's a lot
intense.
to it. Because we're essentially going to give you a really quick history of all like the major political events of the last 600 years.
We're gonna
This is
condense
this is not world history, so keep that in mind.
No, you don't need to know
This is
all this.
human geography, but you do sort of, the more you understand about just like these major trends, the better off you are. So while we're talking, don't feel like you have to write down every single thing or that you have to go learn. Don't about to like read the Wikipedia pages of like any of these topics right now. That will just hurt you more than help you. But we're going to give you a really quick rundown. So let's see if we can do this, Avery, in less than 5 minutes or so.
Okay, we've gone over nation states. They are nations that make up the majority of a state. Nationalism, we've mostly gone over. So these are things nations want to create and maintain their own state. So this is a lot about self-determination, your culture having its own state. So an example of this would be like Japan. They have nationalist tendencies just because they are their own state and so things like that. Colonialism, Europeans take control of other lands, create new boundaries based on European control. So colonialism, that is a big can of worms, but it does, of course, have an effect on the final appearance of a map, as this entire unit is about. And we're actually going to get a lot more into that later on how these can be superimposed onto pieces of land. Decolonization actually has also changed the appearance of a map. So think like Algeria's independence from France created an entire new state. India becoming independent from Britain and then breaking apart after that. So those are all examples of decolonization completely changing the appearance of a map and changing who owns what territories and such. Civil war and genocide is conflict within independence movements and mass ethnic cleansing. An example of this would be in Rwanda in the 90s, there was the Hutus and the Tutsis, I think. Hutus and the Hutus and the Tutsis, and basically the Hutus were, I guess, they were economically, politically under the Tutsis. And so they, of course, were not happy with that as the ethnic majority. And so there was a mass genocide. And then civil wars obviously are between inside a state. It's people, they're groups, and they do not get along. They're going to want to split up. They do not want to be together anymore. Or they want to stage a coup d'etat and take the entire state for themselves. That's also a very real possibility. And then there's the Cold War. This is a major war in determining so many separate wars. So it's like this big term. And then under that, you have the proxy wars, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan. So you can really see all these changes from just that one war itself, because I won't get too far into it. However, basically, the United States was like, I really want to push capitalism, so I'm going to support this side of Korea in their civil war, and the Soviet Union, of course, supported the other one. They're going to want to fight. They're going to fund these wars. They're going to get horrible. And then you're going to see some states divide, like how Korea is to this day. So that's this massive thing.
You did a good job.
All said very quickly.
You are very ready for your AP World Test, I will tell you that.
Thank you.
But
I'm worried.
basically, to give us some even more context here too, if you get an FRQ about Unit 4, it's about political geography. If it's asking you questions, like think about that one, even the culture one that we just did, these explanations as to why the map looks like it does a lot of these are your reasons why, because these are sort of like political shifts, movements that have happened that, or, you know, like concepts, like these are why the map looks like it does, why some languages are where they are, why people have moved, right? Like this can kind of give you a lot of the like explain answer for questions about migration, culture, like you name it, this is going to come into play. All right. There's one question on here. What's the difference between colonialism and neocolonialism? It's pretty much just like neocolonialism is just sort of like the newer version, which tends to be more economic than like kind of the old school colonialism, which is just like, you know, show up, take over. We're a little bit more like sneaky with our, you know, imperialism now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not really that sneaky, but you're right.
An example of neocolonialism or neo-imperialism would be the United States has like financial economic domination over a slew of other states, and so that would be considered a form of neocolonialism or imperialism.
Totally. All right, let's keep it going because there's still quite a lot, but
there is a lot, and we're already at 2 hours, so we gotta push through.
We'll get there.
Okay, so
when you think
processes.
when you like think about that last slide of all those historical events that happened, this helps to explain why those even happened. Go ahead.
Yeah, I remember about that. I remember my own AP Human Geography teacher saying this is about the why of the where of the why, something like that. But that's pretty much what you're going to want to think of throughout the entirety of studying for AP Human Geography. But basically, these are going to explain all of your wars, all of your not nationalism, but organic theory states the need to spread out for nourishment. So this is a theory that has been used to, I guess, serve as an excuse to imperialism. So it was used by Nazis to defend their expansion because they're like, oh, but we need food. We're going to provide all this to so many people, when that's not really what happened. Come on. And then there's also heartland versus rimland theory, which is a really interesting one because you can so easily apply this to like the Cold War. So the heartland was a land-based power that was essential to domination, and it basically states that whoever controls the innermost parts of the Eurasian landmass is going to have domination over the world, I guess. And that would be railroads, lots of territory, coal, protections from navies, and a big population. Whereas rimland theory states that the person who's going to be in control is going to have sea power. You're going to have the coasts, because this, in my opinion, has proven more true than heartland theory. Maybe that's just the American in me talking, but basically sea power makes it easier to trade. You become more global. That's rimland versus heartland, in essence.
Perfect. You can keep going.
And so now we have the types of boundaries, which is just a lot of terms. This is a lot of vocab for the next like 3 slides. Defined boundaries are established by legal documents, and they apply to countries as well as local districts and things like that. An example of a defined boundary would be, think of like Texas, and it has all these or actually no, I think Iowa would be a better example. Iowa, it's just a bunch of squares of their counties, and these are defined counties. They just wrote it up, they put it in a legal document. Those are our counties. We're Iowa. And so that would be a defined boundary. Delimited would be lines drawn on a map to show the limits of a space. And I might be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure they decided on the USA-Canada border by just that's a better example of a geometric one. But they're just like, let's put it on this map. We're going to draw it out. That's what it's going to be. Demarcated are boundaries identified by a physical object. So you can think of walls and signs. Like if you've ever been to the EU, you'll notice that their boundaries between states are oftentimes just signs that say welcome to Italy, and so that's how you know, oh, I'm in Italy now, and that's the boundary between Italy and France. Natural boundaries are rivers and mountains. Think the boundary between the United States and Mexico, though some of it is a wall. It's the Rio Grande River in the Texas part. Geometric boundaries are just straight lines. It's I think the 43rd parallel, 38th, something like that. It's a straight line that separates the United States and America, the United States and America, the United States and Canada. And then there's also Libya and Egypt that are, I couldn't tell you what the parallel is for that, but yeah. Can you explain more about delimited boundaries? A delimited boundary, a line drawn on the map to show the limits of a space. I feel this is a very
it's just very informal. So it's just like, you know, there may be so like, for example, if you think about like during different like wars and things, when the front line is kind of moving, it's sort of like, okay, now we have here, you know, it's sort of just a little bit like more informal.
Yeah. And then our last one here is cultural boundaries, and that would be divisions based on culture. Wheat and rice fields is our example here. Another good example of this would be, if I can think of one, in Nigeria. I'll bring up Nigeria a lot, but there's the Hausa people, which actually have their own section of Nigeria, and so that would be a cultural boundary.
There's in Bosnia, there's different places, there's like streets that literally divide, like on one half of the street it's Christian, on the other half of the street it's Muslim.
Yeah. That's a really good example for like our culture unity. But yeah, there's also in Belgium, there's like an actual, there's tiles along a street that separate Belgium Flanders from Belgium Wallonia, I think is what it's called. So you can actually see these cultural boundaries, which I think is really cool. But yes, so that's our types of boundaries in a basic sense.
Quite a lot of them. So in the next topic, we'll kind of getting deeper into like what are these different types of the ways in which we're organized. You can keep going to the next.
There's a lot of types of boundaries. There's so many boundaries. Disputes over boundaries. Oh my. Okay, so this is where the drama comes in. Irredentism, annexation due to cultural ties to the population. A really good and I guess current too example of this would be Crimea between Ukraine and Russia. Basically, there's these Tatars who are like, sure, so they have Russian ties, and so Russia's like, okay, they're very into gaining territory. You can see how by massive they are, but they want Crimea, whereas Ukraine formerly had it. So that would be annexation due to irredentism. Definitional would be disagreements on how to interpret legal documents. So if we think back to that, the other types of boundaries in our last slide, those would be like a dispute over the sorry, I'm trying to pull it up.
I mean, there could be disputes on any type of boundaries, but it's like
so that would be a dispute on a defined boundary usually, because it's based on the legal documents. I can't think of a specific example of this one, but oh yes, I can actually. There's this island in Washington that the United States is like, okay, I know that we put it on the 38th parallel, but it would be kind of dumb of us to split this tiny island. So they're like, so let me have it. But Canada's like, no, I want it to. So that would be a definitional dispute over boundaries. Locational would be different ideas on where a boundary should be placed. So that's like, I think this boundary should be over here because I want this land. It's pretty cut and dry for that one. Operational, discrepancy on how the boundary functions. I Googled this earlier. An example of this would be the Mexican and US border. The US obviously wants this to be very militarized. It wants it very protected, whereas not everyone agrees with that. Allocational boundaries would be involving natural resources. So as you can see in our picture, we have Azerbaijan and we have Armenia. And basically, there's a whole lot of oil there. There's a whole lot of oil in this area of the world. And so oftentimes we don't know about it. We're going to put boundaries over it, and then we're going to discover the oil, and we're going to say, oh no, we're going to be really disappointed because now there's going to be a big dispute over who gets that oil and whose territory it is in, because it's like there's a big blob of oil under the earth, and then you put a boundary over it, it's not going to divide very evenly. So that's all our disputes over boundaries. And then this is kind of just shotted in there, but the law of the sea, oh my gosh, it's not super important, but I just want you to remember it because I didn't during my exam, and my FRQ was about it. Ugh, it was horrible. But the law of the sea is a body of customs, treaties, and international agreements by which governments maintain order, productivity, and peaceful relations on the sea. So these would be the territorial sea, contiguous zone, EEZ, and high seas. And I think that's pretty much all you need to know about the law of the sea. It's a pretty minor topic. If you want to
Basically,
move on
people
to
fight over boundaries.
that's pretty much what it is.
It's just the history of humans is a constant battle over boundaries.
About the question, could Antarctica's treaty be an example of allocational disputes? I'm not too sure on this, but I don't imagine Antarctica has too much natural resources, so I really wouldn't consider it an allocational dispute. I'm not sure they have any oil or natural gas or anything. Limestone, no. So we're gonna stay on this slide for just a few more seconds, let you guys get caught up a little bit.
I have nothing else to add. Yeah, that was great.
We got it.
Are the disputes over boundaries important to remember for the exam?
I mean, not
just
too many examples, but it's good to know. Definitely good to know.
These are good for multiple choice questions.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next topic.
Boundaries evolving over time. This, some of these are kind of hard to tell between, but I'll fill you in on those. Antecedent are drawn before a population was present. So think of, again, the North American border between United States and Canada. We're going to draw this on the 38th parallel, and this was before European Americans started to move westwards. And so people only started filling in this space after this was already drawn. Then we have subsequent, based on differences between groups of people. So you have to think about Ireland in this. You don't have to, but you can think about Ireland in this. There's these people, they don't go together, let's draw a border, pretty much. So this is just pretty much the opposite of antecedent. There's already people here, and we're gonna draw a border. Relic boundaries are boundaries that used to exist. So think the Berlin Wall that splits Eastern Germany from Western Germany, or not Eastern, but Eastern Berlin from Western Berlin. And this used to be in place. You used to not be able to cross the wall, but then there was that big old party on it in 1989 or something, and Berlin Wall was no more. So that would be a relic boundary. It doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't actually function as a boundary. Consequent boundaries coincide with cultural differences or cultural boundaries. And so you got to think about this as, think Israel and Palestine. These people, they do not get along. So we're going to make boundaries in order to separate them because they really can't be in the same area. Superimposed would be forced without acknowledgement of people's groups. So that would be, I think it was 1812 that the European nations all got together, and it was the Berlin Conference, and they said, let's split up Africa because we all want Africa. And so they're going to draw all these lines over Africa, and it's going to be bad because they are splitting up people. They're joining people together. I'm frozen.
Oh, you're back. You're back. You're good.
I am back. Have you heard about superimposed boundaries? Okay, so we got that. Militarized boundaries are heavily guarded and hard to pass through. Think the DMZ, so between North Korea and South Korea. So this, you can't pass it. There are lots of guns, lots of guards. Wouldn't recommend trying it. And then there's also the exact opposite of that, open boundaries. So this would be like within the EU, there's open boundaries. Like I talked about how there's a sign and all of a sudden you're in Italy, that would be an open boundary. So you don't have to go through customs or anything like that. I think that's it for these ones. So I just spewed a lot of information out at you, but
there were a lot of questions on the difference between consequent and subsequent boundaries.
I was expecting this. I would say that a consequent boundary is a type of subsequent boundary. And basically, it's subsequent. There doesn't necessarily need to be a cultural difference between these people. It's just there was already cut and dry. There's already people here, and we're still going to put a boundary. Whereas consequent boundaries are consequences of their cultural differences, and so that would have to be caused by a cultural difference, and not just there's people already here.
Yeah, the difference is more based on what happened before it happened. The boundary was made. All right, we're gonna move beyond boundaries soon. Soon.
Internal
boundaries.
These are not going to be between states. We're on a tight schedule. Lines and borders that divide one entity or just one entity, one sovereign state into smaller areas. So we have this picture of Texas, and I think those are the electoral districts. I could be wrong though, but those are going to be separate entities within one government, I guess. So redistricting, is a process of drawing electoral districts boundaries in a representative democracy. However, because of this practice, we can then use that and we can manipulate it into gerrymandering, which is manipulation of the boundaries of electoral districts in order to give an advantage to a political group. And then there's cracking, packing, stacking, hijacking, kidnapping. I love the way they named those. I'm not sure we have enough time to cover all of them. And they're pretty
I don't
minor
think that
parts.
on the human geo test it like goes really deep into these. This is a little bit more like AP Gov in a sense. But the main thing to know is just that just like boundaries on the international stage get manipulated, right? They get changed over time. The same thing happens internally. And depending on when, what the rules are within that space of how this works and what the, political process is like, it can really affect who's in charge, right? The law of that space. So.
Okay, I think we can move on to the next topic because cracking, packing, stacking, hijacking, kidnapping, they're pretty minor. You don't really need to know them. Forms of governance. Governance is the process of decision-making and exercise of authority, i.e. democracy, autocracy, oligarchy, federalism, anarchy. But what you need to know for AP Human Geography is federal versus unitary. A federal government is power shared between the central government and the state or local government. So it's more like representative. They're going to spread out. It's going to be less centralized. A unitary government, think one unit, is power held primarily by the central government. So our two examples for this are Germany, which is a federal government, and France, which is a unitary government. Germany has all these different regions and states, and then there's going to be sort of stair steps of power, I guess. And then France is all just, there's still regions and states, but it's less divided, I guess.
What is the US?
The US is a federal government. So you can think of this as there's so many states and we all have our own representative democracies and stuff. But then, like I said, there's stair steps all the way up to the presidency in the federal government.
This was a whole FRQ one year. My students were like,
yeah.
So specific.
And then this, you obviously don't need to remember this whole map, but this is outlining in green the federal states and in blue the unitary states. But you don't need to know all this. Maybe just one or two of them for each.
Yeah.
So another example of a unitary state would be like Japan. Shapes of states.
So the key here is all these boundaries get created, right? They get created for different reasons. whether it's these natural boundaries or these like human designated boundaries, whether they're agreed upon or argued against. All of these things exist, and because those exist, every state has a shape.
Yes.
And then the shape itself affects how to govern that state.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is sort of like the consequences of boundaries create the shapes of states, and then the state has to adapt to that shape.
Mm-hmm. So there are 5, I guess, main shapes of states. So there are compact states, which in my opinion are the goats of states. They're the best that you could possibly be, I guess, in my opinion, because everything is equidistant. It's actually listed as a centripetal force. So this is going to help bring people together because I guess there's more equality. You're all the same distance from the center. There's efficient travel and communication. An example of this would be Poland, also Cambodia. I'm trying to think of more like circular shapes. Vatican City, even though it's so tiny. Elongated are very long states, as Chile, as you can see. Some places are very isolated at the tips, so they're going to be very far from that central government. And so this makes travel and communication pretty hard. And this also makes them hard to govern and defend because you have the central government, but then there's this far off tip of your country. It's going to be very hard to get there and defend it. Corrupted states are the compact states, but then they have this elongated extension, so it's kind of like a mix between these two. An example of this would be Thailand, and it has similar challenges to prorupted states. I think perforated or elongated. And then we have perforated states, think South Africa. And if you remember perforation, it's like, think of a piece of paper and it has all these holes in it that make it easier to tear. So that's a centrifugal force because there's this big hole in your state. And so that would be South Africa, and I think the country within it is Lesotho, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Lesotho. And so this has a high level of dependency. So either state's Lesotho will rely on not being sanctioned by South Africa. That would be like the end of them. And so they really gotta please South Africa. Fragmented states would be, think islands. So you have Indonesia here, which is a bunch of different islands that are all one government. And so this would make challenges with travel and communication similar to elongated states. And those are all the shapes of states. So then we have challenges of sovereignty, and these are also devolutionary factors.
Can you explain the word sovereignty?
Sovereignty is basically self-determination. It is, I guess, becoming separate, becoming your own. So that would be sovereignty, and it is consolidating your power and becoming your own state. Physical geography is a challenge to sovereignty. So think like Kashmir in, I think it's India or maybe Pakistan, I'm not sure, but it's in the Himalayas, and so that is going to challenge its sovereignty because it is so, I guess, isolated. And then you can also think of like, challenge to sovereignty in physical geography. We can think back to like perforated states and what was it? Fragmented states like Indonesia. There are all these islands. This physical geography is going to make it hard to communicate, and that is going to be a challenge to their sovereignty. And it's going to be a devolutionary factor as well because the islands don't really communicate as much. Ethnic separatism would also be a devolutionary factor. So minority group independence, Irish Home Rule. Another great example of this is I was reading this book about Scottish people who obviously want to be Scottish and they don't want to be a part of Great Britain anymore, and so that would be a part of ethnic separatism. Terrorism is used by ethnic separatists. So think the Basques in Spain, or I guess terrorism is more so a cause or an effect of all of these. That's going to pose a problem to states, and it's going to be a devolutionary factor. Economics, so control of resources. Tribal groups in Amazon obviously aren't as economically well off as their peers in Rio de Janeiro and stuff. So they're going to want to split off. They're not as happy because they're poor, and no one likes that. social and cultural issues, so religion, language, and history. Federal systems avoid this. So Belgian, Flemish, Wallonia. Thank you. I thought it was Flanders. Okay, Flemish. So these are all gonna pose a problem because there's these two culture groups, and everyone wants to be their own. Everyone wants the self-determination, and so they're not going to be too happy being within the same group as another person. Then irredentism we talked about earlier with the disputes and stuff. And then that is a movement to unite people by language across nations. This doesn't have to be language, but it can also be any cultural aspect. So those are your challenges of sovereignty.
Yeah, it's like it is like I know there were some questions about like what is devolution. Devolution is essentially what happens when you get so many of these forces that pull things apart, right? Like these things on the screen right now are the challenges to remain independent. Like if you have any of these things happening within your state, you know that you have these like forces that are pulling you apart. And devolution is just sort of when that kind of happens, when you get the breakdown of power.
So state fragmentation would be a form of, these are the forms of devolution. So autonomous regions are ethnic minorities with local governments. They are parts of bigger states officially, and they have allegiance to the bigger state. However, they have their own autonomous zone. So that would be the Navajo in the United States, Jewish people in Eastern Russia. This would also be a good example of this would be Catalan in Spain. And so that would be an example of devolution via an autonomous region. Subnationalism has no local government, so it's sort of the same thing as autonomous regions, but they're not officially recognized by that government. And so they don't have their own representation in government and stuff like that, but they have the strong allegiance to a group. So that'd be Quebecois in Canada. So they're not an autonomous zone, but they still want to be one. Uyghur people in China and Crimea. And then Balkanization. This is the whole Yugoslavia thing that you were asking about earlier. And basically, this big region is in ethnic conflict, and they want to fragment into so many states. So basically, Balkanization is one state, and it's gonna like almost like glass. Like you throw a rock at a mirror, and it becomes so many states. That's Balkanization. So it should be devolving so much into so many different states, pretty much.
So there were some questions in here about like, you know, whether things are positive or negative. And it really depends on who you ask.
Yeah,
for any of these things, right?
It's difficult to say whether something is inherently positive or inherently negative just in itself, but this becomes even harder when you're talking about politics.
Yeah. So, you know, it's like when you think about there's this like there's this thinking in tech where you sort of get this like bundling and unbundling of forces. And it's kind of similar when it comes to like political geography, right? Because you're talking about people and whether or not people are happy with who they are being ruled by. And there's so many different like layers to that. So when you think about some of these different concepts, if you ask the people who feel marginalized, then something like balkanization is great. If you ask the people who are in power, it's bad, right? So it just kind of depends on like the perspective that you're taking on it, like what you're trying to figure out. It's not as simple as like positive or negative. I mean, you know, obviously you can look at things like violence not being a positive thing, but even then when you ask people who are part of like violent overthrows or violent like devolutions of states, that can still be this like positive because it leads them to more freedoms, more rights. It's just not as simple. All right, we've got a few more pieces of. So one thing to define here is like we defined inter and intra before. Supra is another like
Root word.
Part of the word. Yeah, root word. Thank you. So what is supranationalism?
supra is going to go across, not really nations, but states. It's going to go between states. So you can think of United Nations, NATO, the European Union, and NAFTA. And these are all examples of political supranationalism. So they're political entities that are going to go across so many different sovereign states. And this can also actually be, I guess, posed as a challenge to sovereignty, although we don't have to go too much into that if you don't want to. The United Nations was made in 1945 after World War II, and it is on the basis of peace, security, and human rights. And this is basically, it is the main thing that you need to go through in order to become a sovereign state, just because it's such a governing authority. And it, I guess it also provides a lot of laws and rules on states. So that is sort of how it could be posed as a challenge to sovereignty, because it, I guess, limits what you can do as a state. However, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad thing. NATO in 1949 was all about mutual defense in the North Atlantic, and this is caused by the Cold War, if you really want to know. This is 30 countries in North America and Europe. So the North Atlantic, you should know this, you're in geography, but there's North America and there's Europe, North Atlantic, and basically it is a military organization where all these people are deciding, okay, we're going to protect each other, and we're in the North Atlantic. The European Union is a political and economic integration between a bunch of members of Europe. So you have to be in Europe in order to join the European Union. And basically, they all use the euro, or most of them use the euro. I know some of them use their own forms of currency. But and there's a lot of benefits to being in the European Union. But obviously, UK didn't see those because there was Brexit and stuff. But the headquarters is in Brussels, Belgium, and that's it's European Union. NAFTA is North American Free Trade, and this just improves the trade between each of the North American states and basically just makes it easier. And I guess it bolsters the economy too through that. So that'd be United States, Canada, and Mexico are all part of NAFTA, and they trade with each other through that. And that's pretty much it. Economics.
One quick question about supranationalism versus supranationalism. Supra is like it's connecting all these different states. So like these types of organizations are not just about one country, they're about many countries. Supranationalism is just like being extremely national, being extremely patriotic about your country.
Yeah. Economic supranationalism is kind of along the same lines as political. However, this is going to be corporations that go across so many different states, or this could also be economic unions between states, as you can see with ASEAN. I always want to call that ASEAN in my head. ASEAN, which is Southeast Asian Coalition, which has actually brought so much economic prosperity to the region just through this economic union. And then we have World Trade Organization, which regulates trade between countries. OPEC, which is all about oil. And so OPEC countries would be like, I think, Saudi Arabia, all these places with so much oil, and they control 44% of the world's oil. And so obviously this is going to be a massive economic powerhouse, I guess. And then we have transnational corporations. So Apple, Google, Amazon, they are global corporations that operate throughout the entire world.
It's like the transnational corporations you can think about, like even just helping you understand supranationalism. Think about how like a company like any of these companies like Apple, Netflix, Nike, Google, they all have to operate within the bounds of laws like across many different places, right? It's not enough to like go to US Congress and lobby for certain things. They may be headquartered here, but they have to also abide by the laws in Europe, the laws in Asia. They have to be able to work within all those different spaces. They may have employees in all those different companies. They have data privacy laws they have to, work through with all those different countries. So when you think about all of that, it's like they need to be able to organize all of their own resources and what they do across many states. So the company itself creates this like multi-state process. Essentially, the corporation itself becomes that. I don't know, for better or worse. All right. Supra versus super. Supra is just across many, and super is within one.
Yeah. So anything that ends with the R sound, intra, supra, you're going to think multiple states.
Are there
Ers, you're gonna think one.
supranationalist organizations? I mean, yeah, like organizations that are like lobbying for something specific. Even different factions of political parties, I would probably say. All right, let's skip this cram quiz and look at the
we really
FRQ.
don't have time. Yeah.
Yeah, let's
So
just
I
look at
really wanted to make sure that we got to the scoring guidelines of the FRQ just because I saw some questions about that earlier and on how FRQs could be graded. I just want to go over that real quick. It shouldn't take too long. But here's the FRQ for Unit 4.
one more slide.
So we have a stimulus-based one, and this is 2 maps of Spain and Nigeria. And basically they're asking, the number of states in the world has grown to approximately 200. I think it's 193 right now or something. The creation of new countries has been possible as a result of devolutionary forces. Countries such as Spain and Nigeria face devolutionary pressure. So we have Spain, and I think I remember saying this earlier. We have Catalonia, which is like Barcelona and stuff. And there's the Catalan people who want to split from Spain. And then we have Nigeria, which was the Hausa, the Igbo, the what else is there? Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, and they also want self-determination. So we're going to answer next few letter bullet points if we'll go on to that. So first we're going to define devolution. You don't have to remember the Webster Dictionary one, but you're just going to want to define devolution. And I see a lot of people are asking about the MCQ. We can go back to it if we have time. Probably not, but FRQ for now. FRQ for now. So if you guys want to define devolution real quick in the chat.
Getting a question in the FRQ that says define is you're so lucky. That's easy. Just
it's
define it, move on.
Just know what it means. You don't have to be Merriam-Webster. You can just say what it is.
Yeah, perfect. I'm already seeing it. What would you say for this, Avery?
Devolution is basically the process of states fragmenting due to a variety of reasons, such as ethnic divides. It could also be, my mind is blanking right now. It could be ethnic divides. It could be because of physical geography, irredentism, X, Y, Z.
Yeah, but this is just define. So
yeah,
as long as you say it's the breakdown of a state, transfer of a power from federal to more local power, both of those kind of get at it.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to part B.
Part B is a 3-parter. I don't really like that much, but describe how each of the following forces contributes to devolutionary pressures within countries. We're going to talk about cultural diversity, regional economic differences, and physical geography and territorial size. So for cultural diversity, you might want to talk about how the Catalans and the Spanish people are not the same people. They have different cultures. Regional economic differences. Catalan actually economically is doing better than the rest of Spain. And so that would be an economic difference. Physical geography into territorial size. Obviously, bigger states, there's going to be much more differences in their populations, and that would be a devolutionary factor based on territory size. Yeah, balkanization is like an extreme devolution. That's a good way to put it.
Anything else you want to add on part B?
On part B, we can also talk about, I guess we can talk about cultural differences on like Canada and things like, or actually a really good, I guess, example of this is in Canada, of like really different cultures would be, I think Northwestern Canada, which is a province, is devolving because it's forming its own autonomous region, and it's because of these massive cultural differences between the, I guess, European white people that live in Canada versus the Inuit natives of Canada, and so that would also be like a cultural diversity issue in devolution. Now we have part C. I saw a lot of good answers on part B. So part C says identify and explain one political impact resulting from devolutionary pressures related to cultural differences in either Spain or Nigeria. So I'll let you guys answer that really quick.
Over here sneezing.
Oh, I see someone asking if you'll be able to see the first part of your test during the FRQ portion, and I believe that is a no. I don't think you can, just from what I remember. Okay, I see some good answers. So someone says the Catalonia independence referendum 2017, and that is actually exactly what I was thinking of, because as I said earlier, Catalan is now an autonomous region, and that would be a good political impact of these evolutionary factors, is them actually devolving.
Awesome.
And then
Okay.
someone asked about what a score guideline might look like. And this is an example of one. They're really long and they're kind of boring, but it's basically saying these are all the things that someone can say and that you would get a point for. So for example, when asked about cultural diversity, for some reason this is really vague, but the only thing that you could have said that they would have taken is differences in language, religion, history, and ethnicity, which, like, duh, I guess. So that's what a scoring guideline looks like. It's just to eliminate, I guess, like if a teacher's having a bad day and they're like, I want you to get a 1. That's pretty much what this X
I
against.
can give you some insight on this too. Like literally the way that all the tests get scored is they fly teachers into these different cities and they have them all sit in these massive convention center rooms with like a bunch of tables. And you literally sit at this table with like 8 to 10 other teachers and grade for like 8 hours a day. But before all the teachers get there, a few of them get there first. They're like in charge. They create this document. So they go through a bunch of examples, a couple hundred of them. They grade them, getting all the all the nuances out. So like, what are we actually going to accept as the answer here? What does it have to have? And then so then once all the teachers get there, they train them up, and then they're just grading. So binary, like it's literally like if it's not on here, it's not going to count, you know? And so you just have to do what they said counts. That's it. Great process. Can you, Avery?
You're lagging a
Frozen
little bit. But yeah. It might be on my Sorry about that, guys.
frozen.
I think it's getting slightly better. I'm not sure.
Do you think we have time to do the cram quiz? Like, even if it's just a few questions?
We might have time for a few. Let me look on our slides and see how much more we have to get done. I guess we would have to choose between cram quiz or Q&A. I'm not sure which is more important to us.
The cram.
The cram. Okay. Wow. I guess.
Link for that?
Yeah, I can put the link in real quick. Give me a second. Here's that, what we're going to put in chat.
Could you share as well?
Yeah, I'm sharing it real quick. Hold on, I'm not sure if I can share it from my end just because of like permission settings on my computer. Can I send it to one of you guys in order to?
I can try and share it.
Okay, I'll send it to you in our private chat. We're gonna make this quiz so quick. I want you guys to answer lightning speed because we really don't have too much time.
Oh, I'm back.
Hi.
Well,
Right now, most people have decided on quiz rather than anything else. So that's what we're doing. If someone's pulling that up.
Okay, I'm going to share it. Okay, never mind.
Okay.
I can't see the screen share. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna go over and
I don't know, y'all. We're having a lot of tech issues today.
Yeah, we are having a lot of technical
It's
issues.
raining, but like all the Wi-Fi is just like.
There it is.
being in.
Everyone's excited. Do we have the links in chat? I think we have those. Perfect. Cram quiz. Looks like everyone's happy about the cram quiz. Yeah, so in what African country was there a terrible genocide in 1994? The answer is Rwanda. I remember talking earlier about the Hutus and the Tutsis. So that's the answer to that. I'm glad 72% of us got it. That's a pretty good margin. The effort by a group of people to create a new autonomous state in an area controlled by another sovereign state is called what? A. Independence movements. B. Colonialism. C. Devolution. Or D. Nation states. Get those answers in, everyone.
Literally the wrong one.
That's really the answer. And that is an independence movement. Oh, okay. Next question. A steamboat passes through a constricted channel meant to regulate the flow of ships. It has passed through what? This one, I don't think we touched on. A. A choke point. B. A territory. C. A shatter belt. Or D. A city-state.
The one thing we didn't talk about.
I know. This one you can think like constricted. That's like a good clue on what this might be. Do you want to review the answers? All right, that is a choke point. Constriction, choke. Makes sense. Yeah.
Ooh, we're flying.
Yeah, we are. But we don't really have time not to. What type of boundary was imposed on Africa during the Berlin Conference, where European powers carved up African colonies in the scramble for Africa? This one I think I cut out while I was talking about. So let's hope you guys get it.
Get it?
A, cultural, B, subsequent, C, economic, or D, superimposed. Wait until more read the answers. And that is D, superimposed. Because they were already living there, they just ignored the cultural boundaries. Iraq invading Kuwait on the on the basis that Kuwait was drilling for oil and the Iraqi side of the border is what type of dispute? A, operational, B, sorry, I can't read that well. Definitional, C, locational, or D, allocational. Here's an example. How well did you listen to me? It is D, allocational. This is our last one.
Y'all are absolutely crushing it.
You guys are. I'm proud. What is cracking? Oh, this is something we didn't have time for. Oh no! This is a part of gerrymandering, if you guys remember. It's either dispersing voters into several districts to weaken their political power, making two representatives from the same party run against each other, pushing voters into a single district in order to reduce their political power, or D, moving our representatives into a district where they aren't supported. Cracking, I feel like crafting like a unit of people. That might help. And it is A, dispersing voters into several districts in order to weaken them. So it's basically just making them a minority in a bunch of different districts. Go to the next question. What is a dictatorship? Power is held by a single individual or party, often through force or coercion. B, a single individual holds all the local power. C, a form of government in which power is held by a small group of individuals. Or D, political power is shared among different governing bodies. And is A, it has to be held through power or coercion. A lot of you answered B, a single individual holds all the power. I understand how you might say that. However, I think it is much more imperative that you get to like the coercion part of it. So a dictatorship has to be, I guess, not willing. You have to be unwilling. Next question. This is what's devolution? We did this in the FRQ. We were defining it. I think this has to be your last question. A transfer of power from a lower level of government to a central government. A transfer of power from the central government to a lower level of government. People of the government more tax dollars, and the government gives back to people their tax dollars. Even it's not about tax dollars. And I guess we can reveal the answer now. And that is the transfer of power from central government to lower levels of government.
All right, throw out the last question just to
Last question.
finish it out.
Which of the following is a challenge to state sovereignty? A, a high level of economic development and a strong national economy. B, a strong central government with control over all regions. I'm so weird with my words. All regions and populations. A diverse and multicultural population that identifies multiple ethnic or religious groups, or a well-established system of democratic governance with widespread political participation. Brazilian samba was a good book. I like this a lot. I really like Brazilian bossa nova.
All right, reveal.
That is C, a diverse and multicultural population that identifies with multiple ethnic or religious groups. That is the end of our cram quiz. I'm glad that we got to do it. So
I know.
I didn't think we'd have time, and we
You
kind of
can
did.
end
But
quiz so that everybody else can see on their screens. All right, so that is the end of night 2. We
had
got.
fun.
I had a lot of fun. We had units 5 and 6 tomorrow. So agriculture and economics. If you could, please click the link for the AP Human Geo Night 2 survey and send us any feedback. And we will, continue making tweaks every day, making this awesome for y'all so that when you hit game day, you're ready to go.